Misa here, with a story that's very close and personal to me. This story has been a story that stalked me for many years. I had lived in a hotel for a time, and when I lived in this hotel, I was using the rental assistance money to stay there. And it was kind of an odd experience. You see, while I was living in the hotel, I was harassed and abused several times. My husband always told me I was better looking than I always pretended I was, meaning that I was too cruel to myself. And while I was running around one day, I was going into a bar to get some water, and I had gotten a water bottle, but inside of there was two individuals, a woman and a man, who both went by Mr. and Mrs. Pink. When they had essentially talked to me, what they had done is they had bought me a drink. And when they bought me a drink, they had said that this was a special blend. It was an interesting drink to have. I said, I'm not an alcoholic kind of person. I don't drink alcohol. I said, come, sit, please. Don't be like that. You've entered into the bar. This is Jester's bar, by far the goofiest bar there is. You cannot sit here and tell me that you will not have a drink here. I said, quite plainly, no, I'm good, thank you. A man had grabbed me by my arm and yanked me over kind of roughly, is what I had remembered. It felt like my entire wrist had popped out of my arm. It felt so uncomfortable that he was this violent. He pulled me over and he said, have the drink. Drink it with us. Come on. I felt uncomfortable, and I figured if I could chug the drink down, then I could run out the door and go back to my house and be with my husband very quickly. And so essentially I took the drink and looked at him and her very oddly, and then chugged down the drink. I remember she came over and began fondling my hair, and when she fondled my hair, she had essentially began touching my arms in a very weird and specific manner. When she had done this, she was looking at us very oddly. She flat out had said multiple times, "You have such beautiful, beautiful long arms. They're very proportionate to your body, and they're very beautiful, and your hair is so gorgeous." I said, thank you. I was feeling vomitous from the drink immediately. I remember feeling as if something had hit me really hard in the stomach. And I said, well, I better be going. I said, please don't leave. It's going to cause us so much problems. You're quite beautiful, and we'll worry about you the whole time. I mean, if you go out there, you could slip on ice. That'd make it much worse for you. I said, well, that's true. Essentially what had happened was I ended up in the ER that night because I was drugged with Benadryl. And the reason they called themselves Mr. and Mrs. Pink is in reference to the Benadryl tablets. The woman who came up to me was a woman named Megan Fox. And this woman is actually a transgender who had cured their body parts through organ harvesting. Many people forget you can have your head cut off and put back on, and that in that circumstance, you can still live your life. So why not genitals, is what they had always say. And when you see medical practitioners claiming that you cannot grow body parts and put them onto you, they're lying. And when they say that it's impossible to have implant surgery done properly, they're lying. And so when I had ended up in the hospital that night, I remember just a blur. I was in the emergency room and everything had blacked out for me right then and there. I didn't even remember what had happened. I just remembered the woman touching my arms, and I thought I remembered them beginning to stroke my ring finger, and it was just a very weird experience. When it had happened, though, however, I had woken up to a tubal ligation tube hanging out of my mouth. I had tears rolling down my face, and I swore I smelled blood, but I didn't know how. As I opened my eyes, I saw a team of medical individuals surrounding me, and once they had surrounded me, they as individuals had then essentially tried to save my life. Once they had done this, there was an odd vacuum going through my body. And they said, now listen, we woke you up. We're going to begin vacuuming your body. We're going to try and get you into a hospital bed upstairs. I had blinked my eyes and nodded. They began to vacuum my throat, and I had this horrible coughing feeling and wheezing feeling through my throat. everything had clenched down and tightened on my body, and there was just this awful, weird feeling. And essentially, what had happened to me was that for me, I completely had vomited, it felt like, but I wasn't. A vacuum had cleaned everything up. I looked at everyone with these hazy eyes of confusion. I had tapped onto the person's hand, or was trying to, while my hands were binded down on the bed, and I was trying to get their attention. I wiggled my hand out from under the blanket and tapped on their arm. They said, "Again?" And I said, "Yes." And they had done the vacuum again. I was not intending to say this, but at the same time, I feel like it helped me. And when they had done this, they had then went into the process of getting the tube out of my throat. And they said, "Just hang in there, don't worry. We just vacuumed you a few times. Everything should be okay." They vacuumed my throat several times. And then when they had done this, they pulled the tube out of my throat. I remember coughing and feeling this awful sharp pain. I looked down and noticed a tube coming out of my crotch. And they said, "That's your catheter, dear. You overdosed. Are you okay? What had happened?" I said, "I walked into a bar to get some water. I thought it'd be okay. Sometimes I see some people walk in there, and there's kids that walk in there some days, and I thought it'd be okay. You shouldn't go into a bar, ever, if this is the kind of thing that happens to you in bars, right?" And I said, "Yes. However, I went to get water, and it's kind of hard to change the past now. And so this is what had happened." And they said quite plainly, "Well, you can't go into bars. That's not good for you." And I said, "Well, yes, I understand that." And they said, "So who did this to you?" They went by Mr. and Mrs. Pink, and they were touching my arms and my body parts and my hair. And essentially, what had happened was I blacked out right then. They told me I couldn't walk home because of the ice. Why am I here? And they said, you overdosed on Benadryl. You did a Benadryl overdose, and we just had to pump your stomach from the toxic chemicals within your stomach. Do you remember that? Do you remember what happened? Do you know why you're here?" And I said, "Yes, I was drugged by a couple that go by Mr. and Mrs. Pink, and I think they were trying to organ harvest me. They were stroking my body very weird. Is there missing body parts on me?" And they said, "No, we haven't noticed anything of that, but you did overdose on Benadryl, and someone had noticed and called the police, and we have arrested several people to whom we were going to take you in a vehicle, and they are currently in jail, and we have found a criminal record that they've done this before to other people. Would you like to talk to the police?" I said, "Yes." I had talked to the police and stayed at the hospital for some time until finally I had left and went back to the hotel. I had found out that they were organ harvesters who constantly had done this, and it was a very scary circumstance. However, it wasn't much time after when I had gone to sleep in the hotel, and my husband had come home bloody. "Where have you been?" I said very calmly, touching his arm. "That sick piece of shit had left the jail," he said, "and I beat the fuck out of him." And I said, "Do you mean Mr. and Mrs. Pink?" He says, "Don't say anything about them, please." I said, "Okay." He says, "Seriously, I just blacked out beating him up." I said, "Were you drugged?" He says, "No, sweetheart, please stop asking questions. My head hurts. I beat him up a lot, and I started to think you'd never forgive me for beating someone up." "Why would you think that? You know I don't feel like you're a monster. You're my hero, and you as an individual are a veteran. Why would I be worried about this? You know how much you protect me. You just stopped someone who had abused me." He said, "Sweetheart, you don't get it. I don't think this abuser's gonna get up again. We need to get out of this hotel room and find another place. I can't stand living here anymore." I said, okay. Do you want me to start packing now? And he says, no. Sweetie, can we just lay in bed and cuddle for a bit? I said, after you shower, you've got blood all over you. I'd walked him into the shower and helped him shower. I was in there with him, kissing him and hugging him. He kissed me on the neck and said, I don't ever want to lose you in my ear. He says, I don't ever want to see you hurt again. You don't deserve to feel this pain. I don't deserve to see my wife like this. We cried for some time in the shower until we had gotten out of the shower and I had begun to make him some food with what we had in the mini fridge. I made us a big bowl of food for both of us to share. 1 pair of chopsticks, 1 large bowl, and a bowl full of cottage cheese, pizza rolls, and chicken nuggets with a little bit of sour cream by the chicken nuggets. We're gonna get fat eating this, you know. He smiled and laughed at me, and I said, I sure hope so. I cuddled into him, and we had fallen asleep. The next day we had packed our things and began to leave, and had moved out and moved into another hotel system. When we had moved out of the hotels, however, they had crouched their way into this hotel system, and my husband was astonished. He thought they were dead. And we had come to find it was 2 plastic surgeons that were organ harvesters that had fixed them up and gave them our new location. We had done very well to cover our tracks because they went to the wrong location several times. And my husband had held on to me very tightly. Our family was safe. Everything was okay. That was until my husband went missing one day. And he had gone for about 2 weeks. And I started to worry because the hotel money was beginning to run out. I didn't know where he was and what was going on. And I figured, I can't pay for all this by myself. And I left. I had returned my hotel key to the front desk and grabbed my things and left. And I had frantically made my way back to the old hotel, thinking maybe he was there. Maybe these abusers had got him. Maybe he was somewhere there. Mr. Pink immediately approached me, and when he approached me, I don't really remember much other than the fact he began hitting me. When he began hitting me, I remember just screaming, "Where's my fucking husband, you piece of shit?" And I remember punching him and hitting him and being dragged into a van. When I was dragged into a van, I was then forced to take Benadryl and was overdosing as we left. I entered a warehouse, and my husband was there. My husband had then watched me being raped while overdosing on Benadryl after they had been raping me for several times. They had vacuumed my stomach and pumped my stomach away from the drugs several times, but then put me back on the Benadryl, laughing at me overdosing several times over. And by the time I'd gotten to the warehouse where my husband was, I had found out he was following a trail where these abusers had gone because they were getting close to finding our hotel. He looked at me and goes, "How did you get here?" And I said, "You've been gone for 2 weeks." And he says, I paid for the hotel. And I said, "Yes, but it was running out of money. We only had such amount of time. You were gone for 2 weeks. And he said, "Baby, you don't get it. I paid more money for you to be there. Why didn't they share this information with you?" And I said, "I don't know. They said that I had to leave." And they said, "Then that's a corrupt hotel system because I paid more money, which means they took my money." And I said, "Okay, well, here we are together." And he says, "Baby, you can barely talk. You need to calm down. If you move more when on Benadryl, it'll go through your system faster. We need to get you to a hospital. We need to get you somewhere where we can pump your stomach." And by the time it had happened, Mr. and Mrs. Pink had ripped me out of my husband's arms and began raping me with Benadryl. I was overdosing, and my husband was screaming. And when you listen to the new song with Machine Gun Kelly by Corpse Husband, you can hear the very same screaming that was recorded from a recorder in his pocket.